This session is the global ecological collapse happening now and the way forward. Michael, welcome.
You know, what we can do to face this, okay? I talked about the We the People Amendment as our offense. And yes, that's something that happens. Constitutional amendments can happen by our elected officials, kind of drafting them. But there's a way it's never happened this way, but it's written in the Constitution for us to do this. How many people have ever heard of an Article 5 convention? Good, good. So there have been now a few states that have called for it: California, Vermont, Illinois, and New Jersey. I do believe New Jersey just called for it. And they've actually called for an Article 5 convention. Massachusetts has legislation right now that has 81 co-signers to, it's called the We the People Act. And it's to be the next state calling for an Article 5 convention. If you don't know what it is, this is what it is. It's a process in the Constitution, the people who drafted the Constitution. And I know we always like to say the Founding Fathers, you know, rights for people. Just fun fact, not really fun, but you know. When the Constitution was drafted, do you know what percent of Americans were covered under it? Someone shout out a number. 20? 4%? Did you say 4? You're really close. It was 6%. 6% of the human beings who occupied the colonies were covered under the Constitution. 6%. So you can really look at the history of the United States as one long struggle of people trying to gain rights, while capital was usurping those rights for themselves. Personhood is very much a part of the struggle in the United States. Who's a person, who isn't a person? Under NAFTA, you can have an American-based company go to Mexico. The Mexican government has to treat them like a Mexican company. Imagine a Mexican going to New York City and saying, I want to be treated like an American citizen. It's not going to happen. So the Article 5 convention process was written in because they imagined a time when there would be congressional gridlock and a way for people to self-organize to get an amendment to change that. And that's the Article 5 convention process. The one time it's been threatened was in the early part of the 20th century, when it had to do with how senators got elected, being appointed by states or directly from people. And the threat alone caused the constitutional amendment that ended up having senators be elected by the people. You need 34 states to call for an Article 5 convention before it happens. And there's a little bit of blurry legality around this because it's never happened before. And some will say you can focus the convention to a specific topic. And that's pretty well understood that you can do that. But it can open up to anything. The safety valve is that 38 states have to ratify it. Okay, so if you've got something that was completely wild and radical, that's like, you know, undoes, you know, the rights and that we all believe in, it's not going to get passed by 38 states. The only thing that has a broad base of support is this issue, the We the People Amendment, saying corporations do not have constitutional rights and money is not speech. Okay? We actually passed in our community, there's a community right next door, it's the district I grew up in. There's an area that's all red. I mean, Mitt Romney, there's a guy named Scott Brown, if you know who that is, you know, and they voted for them all, and it passed by over 70%. It was 75% that it passed for. 75%, and it didn't even make the paper. You know, you have to find out. You had to call. You had to call the town office to find out. They didn't even, when the ballot questions went out, it didn't have it included. The only way you would have known is when you actually went to the ballot to actually vote. But what it shows is there's a broad base of support. Now let me try to connect that with this dire kind of picture that I've laid out about what's going on with the environment. So there I am with Professor Chomsky, and he says this to me, and it's like, okay, so what you're essentially saying is, you laid out that picture of 10% chance if we do all this, but methane's doubling the problem, oh my gosh, and we have this 10 to 15-year window. What's the window? As I said, the window, that's our period of time that we have to wrestle the power away from concentrations of private wealth. That's what we have right now. Because once things get so bad that there's food and water shortages en masse, what do you think's going to happen? What can you imagine in Homeland Security, World of the Patriot Act, FEMA world? What is society going to look like? Might look a little bit like Ferguson, Missouri, right? Much worse, right? What is it?
It'll look like a man.
Right. Well, they'll be, they'll use militarized, vehicles and stuff. I mean, look, there's no surprise. Right now, what's going on? The Pentagon's given. What are they? The town that I live in just got a tank. Like, they got a tank. It's a legit tank. Why do we need a tank? It's this little town, this little, a colonial town, and right up north of Plymouth, right south of Boston. It's like, why do we need a tank? And then, for drug, we don't have like that many problems in our little town, but they have a tank. Okay? So why do you think they're militarizing? This is understood by the ruling elite. Okay? Right. Because when there's social unrest, there will be ways to control people. So we have this window of time to wrestle the power away from the ruling elite. And that's really what, I would say is the timeline. That's what sets the clock. Okay? And at this climate science, that's what's going to drive it. Because when there's instability because of food and water, well, that's what's going to cause the instability. That's what's going to cause, this to further get militarized. Okay? And so, what happens if we do succeed in passing it? Now, some might tell you amendments take 10 to 20 years. Well, we don't have that time. And part of the picture that I painted for you in the other room is that this year we're doing this birthday thing. It's a trial run for the month of May. Next year we're going to do a summer of action from Earth Day to Constitution Day. And that's going to be to try to help for every American, for the message to go viral. Just that this thing called corporate personhood, what is that? So everyone knows what it is. And that they know corporate constitutional rights didn't start with the Citizens United ruling, and that overturning Citizens United is not enough. It's just not enough. And anyone says it is, you've got to stop them in their tracks and start to educate them. Okay? That we need to pass the We the People Amendment to confront this. So we're going to be doing a summer of action from May Day to Constitution Day. Just look at how numbers kind of lined up. I'm not saying too much about that. I'm not reading into that. But I'm just saying it just worked out nicely. 2016 is a presidential election. It happens to be the 130th birthday anniversary of corporations. We're doing a summer of action from May 1st to September 16th. September 17th is the 5-year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. Right? Yeah. Right? So 7 weeks of encampments, hoping for, and this time we would really like to organize, and you're welcome to try to help plan this in your communities, with like Unitarian churches who signed on to the amendment process. And by the way, in 2013, I was a big part of getting passed at the Occupy Second National Gathering, a solidarity statement with Move to Amend and other efforts to amend the Constitution on any level, local, state or federal, to say that the Occupy National Gathering did in fact support that. So Occupy is an alignment. The idea is that when the encampments come out again, that they have the same broad support, just like Mike McCabe's, 12 things and more, right? You have that broad base, it's almost like a political platform. But strategically, the first critical step is the passage of the We the People Amendment, that everyone gets on board with that. And that though people say, well, there's lots of amendment language and there's different approaches, there really aren't. If you look at the amendments, there are no two-pronged approaches like Move to Amend's, and Move to Amend's language is ironclad. And I'm so thankful that they're holding the line and they're not willing to bend, they're not willing to concede anything. And they shouldn't. That we should get on board with that. Right? And Converge to Amend, as was mentioned by Tom in the intro, Converge to Amend is my answer to what I've seen with the global climate convergence, what I said in the other room about Naomi Klein. It's everybody's converging then they don't have any action. They don't have any specific thing. The specific thing is the We the People Amendment. And that's our answer and our way forward. After after we pass the We the People Amendment, I cannot impress upon people enough that that's when the work really begins to build local sustainable communities. And we really need to think critically of doing that. Food storage, okay? Local food production, aquaponics, the big thing, algae as a tool, whatever could possibly be used locally. And honestly, if you tried doing that now, if you ever got big enough, it would get squashed. Because that's what they do. They don't let these initiatives really take fire. You can't roll out solutions. Remember I said about the congressional report, 17.4 million real jobs in sustainability? I mean, we really could address this situation, and we need to with the vigor that we did. We need the type of passion and focus as we did during World War II, that type of transformation of our economy, and we need to do it with the focus of the Manhattan Project. And we need to get this thing done. You know, the technocratic solutions aren't going to do it all, but that's part of the answer. You know, geoengineering projects for carbon capture, I don't lift up those solutions alone because we have to change the system. It's important to change the system. I would be remiss if I did not say this. When we pass the We the People Amendment, it is time for us to learn how to be stewards of the land from those we took it from. And at that point, you know, that's when we can really build local sustainable communities that are people-centered. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be around for any questions. Thank you.